We are just about 24 hours and change from cutdown time in the NFL. The Panthers have to be down, and every other NFL team, have to be down to 53 players by tomorrow at 4 p.m. And there's going to be a lot of discussion about wide receivers. There's going to be a lot of discussion about defensive linemen, defensive backs, quarterbacks maybe. By the way, I'll update you on some of the news we have. Trey Swilling has been cut, a cornerback that they brought in earlier this season. This according to Mike Kay, who had it first. Joe Person has agreed with it from The Athletic. Jack Plummer, according to Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network, quarterback has been cut. Maybe a practice squad possibility there. And Panthers wide receiver Kobe Hudson, also cut. He was a player I liked as a undrafted free agent, had some interesting game tape from college, but obviously making the 53 was always a long shot. They'll still have more to go, but that's just where we stand right now. With all this conversation, I want to remember one thing. Or if I were Dan Morgan or Brant Tillis, or more importantly, a friend of one of those guys, I would want to remind them of one thing. They can do whatever they want. They can break the mold. Right? Part of being a GM, part of being a leader in a front office is knowing the perceived rules. And the other part is knowing when those rules should be broken. Right? There is a kind of standard 53-man roster. 6 wide receivers, 2 or 3 quarterbacks, X amount of this, X amount of that. But you can do whatever you want. There are no rules against it. Right? The Browns are going to keep 4 quarterbacks. Whether you think it's smart, dumb, whatever, they're allowed to do that. If you see more value in keeping a 4th quarterback than in keeping a 6th wide receiver, you can do that. You might be thin at wide receiver, but you can. Right? And it's not the best way to relate everything back to like, well, this is what I think when I gamble. But part of what I think when I gamble is, what am I going to feel the most stupid about if it goes wrong? Right? If for 20 years you bet against Tom Brady, at some point you just got to feel dumb when Tom Brady wins and you lose money on it, right? What are you going to feel the most dumb about? So if you're the Panthers and you're looking at it and you go, we have 7 wide receivers that we love, all dudes, all guys we think are going to make it in the NFL. Keep 7, because if you cut one of those guys and they go somewhere else and have a great season, you're going to feel like an idiot. Or trade one of them, right? So you at least get something back. We'll talk about that later on. But the same is true. Like, we have to keep another, defensive end. Well, it's like if you hate that defensive end, you don't have to keep him just to get the numbers right. And the same is true for, hey, your last wide receiver on the roster doesn't have to be a great special teamer. Right? It doesn't. It's about figuring out what the rules are, why they are there, and figuring out if you have a good enough reason to break the rules. So the Athletics prediction for wide receivers to make the team: Adam Thielen, Tedero McMillan, Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, Jimmy Horn, Hunter Renfrow, and Bryson Tremaine. That's 7 wide receivers. That would be above kind of the traditional. And you'd be cutting David Moore, who has been a good special teamer for you and is a trusted voice for Dave Canales. Now, normally I would say, gosh, get that down to 6. There's names there that can go. Get it down to 6 and use that somewhere else. But at the same time, right, Bryson Tremaine, young guy, minimal experience. The fact that he didn't play, sat down with the starters in preseason game 3, tells me there's something about him the Panthers like. I may not see it, but if they like him, they can, right? And if we're really boiling it down to like the nitty-gritty, I don't recall any team missing the playoffs and going, you know what, it all came down to we kept the wrong guy as the 52nd man on a 53-man roster, right? You can take chances at the end. And then on top of that, the things you've done this offseason, sometimes you just have to you're almost already pot committed, okay? You're already pot committed on some of these. Let me explain. The Athletics prediction on who will make the team for the defensive line. They have Derrick Brown, A'Shawn Robinson, and this is more interior, right? Those outside linebackers don't count, even though they're kind of defensive ends from my day. Derrick Brown, A'Shawn Robinson, Bobby Brown, Turk Wharton, Cam Jackson make the team. Notable cuts, they had Shy Tuttle, LeBrian Ray, Jaden Crumity. This one's kind of already been decided, right? Because if you look at last year, at times, Tuttle and Ray started. At times, they played really well. At times, they carried a bulk of the responsibility for the interior of that defensive line in Derrick Brown's absence. But then you brought in Bobby Brown and Tershawn Wharton this offseason. You drafted Cam Jackson. Those decisions have already been made, and you kind of have to live with them now. Right? Have some conviction. Believe in your evaluation ability. Sometimes I see teams on cut down day get real conservative, and I'm going, ooh, I don't like that, right? If you brought in somebody's replacement and you spent resources on that replacement, a draft pick, a bunch of free agency money, whatever it is, trust the evaluation you made at that time. Even if it does it might feel foolish going like Shy Tuttle, he's played a lot of snaps for us. And I'm going like, well, if you were going to have that kind of cold feet, don't draft Cam Jackson or don't bring in Tershawn Wharton, right? You've already made that mistake if it's been made. Don't turn it into two mistakes now. And then, sit back and enjoy what you established, which is you strengthen to strength. I think most people look at the Panthers defense and say interior defensive line is and was a strength. So if you're cutting guys that were a part of a strength last year because you brought in better guys, celebrate the fact that you strengthened to strength, which a lot of teams struggle doing. It is kind of a weird rock and a hard place quandary to catch yourself in, which is it's so tempting to put all your resources on things that you don't think you did well last year, when sometimes the best way to improve your team is to continue to build on to what you do best and turn that into a super strength. Now, I'm just using wide receivers and defensive line to kind of talk about things in a bigger picture here, because those are the ones where I think you're cutting players, or might potentially be cutting players, that are legit, that are like NFL roster stalwarts. There are also some positions, defensive back, wherever, where I think you might be rostering guys that you'd like to maybe cut and try to sneak onto the practice squad. Right? You're going to be depending on guys at off-ball backer when maybe you wish those players would have been waived and brought back on practice squad. And those are much easier decisions, right? I guess it's kind of tough to pick which of these maybes you're going to keep, but it's much, you're not sweating over, if we cut this guy, is he going to turn into something great? And then the last thing is, and this is my reminder, I'll say it again tomorrow. I say it every single cut down day. Your 53-man roster initially is not what it will be game one. Right? I almost think it's kind of cruel when they call the players in that are roster bubble and say, like, we want to let you know you're going to be on the roster tomorrow. We want to let you know you're making the 53. Because I'm going, well, wait a second. Everybody else is cutting guys too. If they claim someone off waivers, that player might be gone 16 hours later. Or in wide receivers, right? Keeping 7, those 7 we mentioned, Thielen, McMillan, Leggett, Coker, Horn, Renfro, Tremaine. If they trade Adam Thielen, you go from 6, that's a little more than they wanted. Or 7, that's more than they wanted, down to 6 at the drop of a hat. And now you can go use that other roster spot on a waiver claim. You can go try to grab somebody that you like that you had to waive back, or snag someone off someone else's roster. The NFL roster is a living, breathing organism every single day. It's very different than college, right? College, you got to make your moves in incoming freshmen and then during the couple of transfer windows. But you're not, after week 3, oh no, our defensive line isn't as good as we thought. Let's go make a trade. Let's go send a 5th-round pick. You're not doing that. Let's go make a claim. Let's go grab a guy off the street. You're not doing that. In the NFL, you are.
Things definitely change more on that NFL roster. The thing for me is the Bryce and Tremaine like hype and
Came out of
apparent
nowhere.
chances of him making the roster. Kind of felt like it came out of nowhere because for so long we thought we knew what receivers they were kind of looking at or deciding between, and then all of a sudden, he sits out with the starters for that last game, and then it seems like he's going to make the team. So I don't know if that maybe signals that the Adam Thielen trade hype is like there's a lot of smoke there, or if they just showcase something in camp that they weren't expecting. But that aspect of it all has been very interesting to me.
Here's my, reading of the tea leaves from the outside situation. I think they came to grips with the fact that they were going to move on from David Moore. And David Moore is I wouldn't be surprised if 3-4 years from now, David Moore is on a Dave Canales coaching staff somewhere. I think they're that close. But David Moore brings a lot special teams-wise. And apparently Tremaine brings some of those same deals. And you can't use 2 wide receiver spots on a guy that's really good at like covering punts. Maybe one on returning punts and one covering punts, but not 2 guys running down on kickoff. So if they were going to keep David Moore, I'm not sure Tremaine has that spot. But once they came to grips with, all right, it might be time to move on from my old trusty David Moore, Tremaine was the guy with the skill set best to replace it. But again, that's just from the outside looking in. And you can also remind people of this. What was it last year? Tim Patrick was running as the number 2 wide receiver with Denver all preseason, and then they cut him before 53 men. Like sometimes, I don't know, they don't realize it until they all get in a room before 53-man roster and go, all right, who likes this guy? I thought you did. No, I was playing him because I thought you wanted me to play him. Oh, nobody likes this guy? All right, let's cut him, even though he's playing like 60% of the snaps with the ones. Sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes. Not often, but sometimes.